morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. I welcome all the members from Chandigarh from PNH Judiciary who have joined us today. Today's webinar is on role of trial courts and juvenile justice boards under the Juvenile Justice Act 2015. The session will be taken care by Sir Balwinder Singh Sarasar, who is the ADJ and faculty member at Chandigarh Judicial Academy. Like during all the webinars, like we said, that the session will be taken care by the speaker, like the Sarasar, and the question can be raised after the session is over, because the question that you might have right now will already be answered, will already be covered during the session. So asking the same question after the session is over will not make sense. So you can keep your question to the last and ask this question thereon. This session would be for 1 hour, wherein sir would be detailing the entire session, and then we'll get into the question answer round. Without any further ado, I would request Balwinder Singh Sarasar to please start the session, and then we take care of the question answer round. Sir, welcome, sir.
Chetan. Thank you, Chetan. First of all, I wish a very good morning to all the participants who have joined me today on this webinar. My topic today is role of Juvenile Justice Board and the Children Court under the JJ Act of 2015. Now, before I commence with the role of the board and the Children Court, I would like to share with you all a brief history of this act and the overview of the act. So far as this act is concerned, it deals with two categories of children. One is children in conflict with law, and second, children in need of care and protection. In my presentation today, my emphasis would be only on the first category of children, that is children in conflict with law. Now, this act is a holistic act which deals with the juveniles and establish a separate and alternate justice system which is different from the adult justice system which we often adopt in case of trials of adults. Now, going into the brief legislative history of the act, the first act of universal application or uniform application in India was the Children Act of 1960. The noteworthy feature of this act was the age bracket of the child. Under this act, in case of male, child was 16 years, and in case of female child was 18 years. After the Act of 1960, we had the Act of 1986. Under this act also, the age bracket of the juvenile was kept the same as was under the Act of 1960. That is, in case of male child, 16 years. In case of female child, it was 18 years. Then came a United Nations Conventions on the Rights of Child, 1989, which India also ratified. Now, under this UN Convention, it was made obligatory for the member parties to amend their domestic legislation, keeping in tune with the conventions with this convention, where the child was defined as every human being who is below the age of 18 years. In deference to this UN convention, the legislature framed the Act of 2000. So then we had the Act of Juvenile Justice, Care and Protection of Children Act 2000. Under this act, the age of juvenile was fixed at 18 years, irrespective of the gender. After this act, we had a unfortunate Delhi incident which raised hue and cry seeking amendment of this act. The government appointed a committee on amendments to criminal laws, which was headed by Justice J.S. Verma. But incidentally, this committee also rejected the demand for lowering the age of juveniles to 16. Instead, it recommended the need to reform and restructure the existing Juvenile Justice Act 2000. However, disregarding the recommendation of Justice Verma Committee and heeding to the popular demand, the legislature introduced Juvenile Justice Care and Protection of Children Act 2015, where a compromise formula was adopted. Now, the twin objective of this act were setting deterrence standards for juvenile offenders and protecting the rights of the victim. Now, so far as the act is concerned, it's a special act and its provisions are applicable from the point of the apprehension of the child till the end. Now, if we see the structure under the Act of 2015, which makes a departure from the precursor Act of 2000, we will notice two major changes under this act. One is the classification of the offences into three categories, that is petty offence, serious offences and heinous offences. Now, in the heinous category, we have further twofold bifurcation, that is heinous offences committed by a child below 16 years and a heinous offences committed by a child bracketed between 16 to 18 years. Now, so far as petty offences, serious offences and heinous offences committed by children below 16 years of age, the Act provides for one uniform procedure to be adopted by the board. But in case of heinous offences committed by the child who are bracketed between the age of 16 to 18 years, a separate procedure has been visualized. Now, in such category of children, the Act mandates a conducting of a preliminary assessment into three factors given in section 15 of the Act by the board. Now, after conducting this assessment into the mental capacity, circumstances, etc., the board has to decide whether the child should be tried as a child or the child should be tried as an adult. Now, if it comes to the conclusion that the child should be tried as a child, then the matter has to be disposed of by the board on its own. But if it takes the other view that the child should be tried as an adult, then the board is required to transmit the case to the children court. Once the case comes to the children court, it is obligated upon the children court to make a fresh assessment under section 15 regarding the child. Now, board is not the children court is not bound by the decision of the board. The children court is bound to make a fresh assessment on its own, disregarding the opinion given by the board. And after making an independent assessment, the children court is required to decide whether the child should be tried as a child or as an adult. If it comes to the conclusion that the child needs to be tried as a child, then the children court shall conduct the proceedings just like a board and pass the order under section 18 as it deems fit. But if the children court takes the other view that the child should be tried as an adult, then it shall commence the trial as per CRPC. So therefore, this is the first, we can say, protective mechanism made available to the juvenile so as to prevent his transmission to the regular criminal justice system and retain him under the juvenile justice system itself. That is the preliminary assessment to be made by the board first and then by the children court next. Now, even if the juvenile is tried as an adult by the children court, all is not gone for the juvenile. he has a second chance of rehabilitation. Now suppose the children court finds the juvenile guilty of the commission of the offence and award the sentence. Now in that eventuality, the children court is obligated to make a second assessment when the child attains the age of 21 years. This is basically a second window or a second chance to a juvenile that if he reforms himself, then he can escape the gallows and he can be released. Once he attains the age of 21 years, the object is to rehabilitate him in the society. So I shall be taking this broadly subsequently. This was the broad overview which the new act enlists vis-a-vis the previous act, that is the Act of 2000. Now the Honorable Apex Court in Dr. Subramanian Swamy versus Raju has noted the differentia between the criminal justice system and the juvenile justice system, and has emphasized that the JJ system is not to punish the child in conflict with law, but to seek to reform and rehabilitate the juvenile to make him, to allow him to make an honest living. Now this judgment is very important. It gives the differences between the normal criminal justice system and the juvenile justice system, and also discusses the main provision of the act in the light of the intention of the legislature. Now moving on to the next aspect of JJ Act of 2015, I would only like to make a reference to the few definitions. Now here we will notice that the child is defined as a person who has not completed the age of 18 years. So far as the child in conflict with law is concerned, his age is to be determined as on the date of commission of the offence. Then we have the definition of juvenile, which has also been set at the age of 18 years. Now, so far as the definition of petty offences, serious offences, heinous offences is concerned, earlier there has been some dispute because of the faulty language used in the provision. In case of serious offences, it has been defined that it includes offences for which the punishment under IPC or any other law is imprisonment between 3 to 7 years. But in case of heinous offence, it has been defined to include offences for which minimum punishment under IPC or any other law is imprisonment for 7 years or more. So the difficulty arose that the offences in which the punishment is more than 7 years, but there is no minimum punishment prescribed of 7 years. Now this controversy stands resolved first by the Bombay High Court in 2018, then now by the Honorable Apex Court in Shilpa Mittal case, holding that in the category of heinous offences, only those offences would be included where the punishment prescribed is minimum sentence of 7 years or more. So where there is no minimum sentence of 7 years or more, those shall be taken under the category of serious offences. This is the list of heinous offences as per this definition and the judgment. Under IPC, we had very few offences which will fall in the category of heinous offences. Generally sexual assault cases, murder, 304B, dowry death, etc. So far as Haryana is concerned, 379B would also be included in the category of heinous offences. Now, apart from IPC, there are a number of other special acts in which the offences carries a minimum sentence of 7 years or more. Those would also be included within the ambit of the heinous category offences. Now, next part is the procedure in relation to children in conflict with law. Sections 10 to 26 lay down the broad procedure in this regard. Now, one of the difference between the regular criminal system and the juvenile justice system is that here the child is not to be arrested. The child is only to be apprehended and then placed under the charge of special juvenile police unit or child welfare police officer, who are required to produce the child within 24 hours before the board. Now, this apprehension is to be done only in serious situations, and in normal situation, the child is not to be apprehended and rather to be placed in charge of some guardian or some other person. Next important area is bail to child in conflict with law. Section 12 deals with this issue. Now, unlike the normal cases where the gravity of the offense, the nature of allegations play a very vital role in adjudicating bail applications, under the juvenile justice system, it is relegated to a backstage rather. Section 12 mandates that whenever any child who is alleged to have committed or accused of commission of bailable or non-bailable offence is apprehended or detained, such person shall be released on bail with or without surety. So the opening part of the section mandates the release of child in conflict with law on bail. Now, in case the bail is refused, then only the child is to be sent to some observation home or place of safety during the pendency of the inquiry to be conducted by the board. Now, there are certain principles which have been settled by the judicial courts based upon the interpretation of this provision. Now, since this Act is of 2015, the law is evolving on this particular Act by the courts, and therefore we find certain contradictory case law of different honorable high courts on certain points. But we would like to converge certain common and general principle from the entire case law, which would act as a guiding factor for us in adjudicating the matters under the Act. Now, so far as grounds of refusal under Section 12 is concerned, there are three grounds which are mentioned in the statutory provision. The first is if there appears reasonable grounds for believing that the release is likely to bring that person into association with any known criminal. Second is if his release may expose the child to moral, physical, or psychological danger. And the third is that his release would defeat the ends of justice. In all the above three situations, the board is required Chetan.
Just go back to your PPT, sir. Just go
Chetan?
back. Can you hear me, sir? Sir, can you hear me?
Yes, probably the PPT is missing. Am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible. Your video is visible. I think just
Okay.
open the PPT again, sir. I think this PPT just crashed. Nothing else.
Hello.
So can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I'm just saying that it's only the PPT that just crashed, nothing else. Just reopen the PPT, sir.
Hello. Problem
Yes, sir, sir. Can you hear me? Sir, can you hear me?
Chetan? Yes, yes, I am able to hear you. Am I also audible?
Yeah, you're audible, sir. You're audible. You're visible as well. There's no problem with
There's
that.
some technical glitch
Sir,
in the connection.
Okay, just missing in between. Okay. Sir, your PPT is open or your PPT has been has been minimized?
I don't know. I have to
So
check it.
just minimize this window, sir.
Yes, it's open.
So it is open now. We can see it, sir. You can minimize this window.
Okay.
And there's some, and you can minimize this window from here as well. The bottom right by clicking on the minus sign next to live. Yeah, this minus sign. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Shall I start?
Yes, sir. Please, sir.
Yes.
So you're on grounds of refusal, right, sir?
Yes.
Okay, sir. I'll keep an eye if you. So can you just click on the next slide just for check if it's going to be visible or not?
Yes.
So it is visible. So you may continue, sir, please.
So far as these three grounds are concerned, the problem which arises is that generally the principal magistrates, they are conditioned to decide cases under the regular criminal justice system where the gravity of the offence plays a vital role in adjudicating bail application. Now, while considering the bail application of juveniles, they are prone to apply this criteria while adjudicating these applications and often dismiss the bail application of the juveniles on account of the gravity of the offence. Now, this criteria adopted is faulty. It needs to be rectified. Now, the mandate of the provision is clear that it seeks to rehabilitate and restore the juvenile who has come in conflict with law back to the society. The inquiry or the trial which is conducted under this act is not of adversarial nature. So therefore, while considering the bail applications, they have to call for the material from the child welfare officer, probation officer, or any other aggrieved party, which would indicate or help the Juvenile Justice Board in coming to the conclusion that any of these grounds exist. Simply reproduction of the language of the provision would be of no use and would be rather improper exercise of discretion under this provision. Now let us take, for instance, the first ground, that there appear reasonable grounds for believing that the release is likely to bring the person into association of known criminal. Now, unless and until there is a report by the investigating officer that he belongs to the gang of criminal, he has come into the bad company, there are a large number of other cases in which he is involved. So unless and until some material comes on the record, this ground is not to be stated ceremonially in order to dismiss the bail application of the juvenile. So there must be some material available with the board before it dismiss the bail application on this ground. Second is expose the child to moral, physical, or psychological danger. Now, for this purpose, SIR, SBR has to be examined by the board. There has to be some material that whether his release on bail would expose the child to any of these dangers. Third is defeat the ends of justice. Now, this is a controversial clause. Now, question is, does this third clause or ground that his release would defeat the ends of justice has to be given the meaning in the context of the previous two grounds, which are obviously for the benefit of the juvenile, or this clause is to be given an open meaning whereby the gravity of the offence, the situation and condition of the juvenile vis-a-vis the victim everything has to be examined. Now here, so far as defeat the ends of justice is concerned, the judicial courts have taken the view that the seriousness of the offence, the gravity of the offence will also be taken into consideration along with other factors on the record to bring it within the ambit of this third ground. But let me make it clear that mere gravity of the offence alone is not the criteria to dismiss the bail application of the juvenile. And next important part is that the board must record the reasons based upon cogent material on the record for denying the bail application. Mere reproduction or ceremonial reference to these grounds in the bail order is improper exercise of discretion. I shall be also discussing certain case law which will give a better insight into the grounds of this refusal, how the judicial courts have interpreted it in different situations, and there has been a variation also in its application. The next part is the time limit which is set out for conducting certain inquiries under the Act. Along with this, we have also to discuss that whether the time period of inquiry stipulated therein is mandatory or directory. What will happen if these inquiries are not conducted within this prescribed time period? Now, when the child is produced before board, it has to hold inquiry in accordance with provisions of this Act and may pass such order as deemed fit under section 17 and 18. The outer limit for completing this inquiry by the board is 6 months, 4 months original plus 2 months extended period. The extension of 2 months can be there only after recording reasons in writing by the board. Now, what if the time period is exceeded? If the inquiry pertains to petty offences and it remains inconclusive for 6 months, the proceeding shall terminate. But practically, if we see the working of the this juvenile justice boards in the field, then these inquiries are not being terminated. The CGM of the area is obligated to inquire to oversee all these inquiries, and if any inquiry is remaining inconclusive in respect of petty offence for 6 months, the proceedings are required to be terminated and cannot continue. If the inquiry pertains to serious or heinous offences and the board requires further extension of time, the same has to be granted only by the CGM for reasons to be recorded in writing. So in that eventuality, the board principal magistrate is required to write it to the CGM, seeking extension of time, giving reasons for not completing the inquiry within the statutory period of 6 months, and the CGM, after application of his mind, may either extend the time period or reject it. Next is the timeline for completing the preliminary assessment under section 15 by the board. That is in case of heinous offences committed by the child between the age bracket of 16 to 18 years. Now here the time period fixed is within 3 months from the date of its first production before the board. Now the judicial courts, I'll refer to a few judgments of the Honorable High Courts, where this provision has come up for interpretation, that whether sticking to this timeline is mandatory or is it directory. Now in such situation, the opinion is that this is directory, not mandatory, but it is not to be flouted in any case. So the board is required to complete the inquiry within 3 months, 1 month gathering the material for making the preliminary assessment, and then 2 months for completing this assessment and coming to some conclusion. Then there are few principles which the board has to keep in mind. Now there are principles under section 3 also which permeates the application of the act at the hands of board as well as the courts. Now these are in addition to that. First is the board shall satisfy itself that the child is not subjected to any ill treatment at any stage. The proceedings which it is to conduct has to be in the child-friendly atmosphere. The child shall be given the opportunity of being heard and participate in the inquiry. Now this principle is applicable to the board as well as to the children court when it makes a fresh assessment under section 15. The inquiry shall be disposed of through summary proceedings as per procedure prescribed under CRPC in respect of petty offences. In respect of serious offences, the procedure of summon cases under CRPC is to be followed. In respect of heinous offences, we have two categories. The children below 16 years of age, summon cases procedure will be followed, and children above 16 years of age, the procedure under section 15 of the Act is required to be followed. Now, next is regarding the conduct of preliminary assessment into heinous offence by the board. Now, this is also very delicate, important and serious function with which the board has been tasked with under the Act, because this is going to decide the fate of the juvenile between the age bracket of 16 to 18 years, having been accused of committing heinous offences, whether the child shall remain within the juvenile justice system or whether he would be transferred to the regular criminal trial. Section 15 says the board has to conduct preliminary assessment into three different factors. The first factor is with regard to his mental and physical capacity to commit such offence, ability to understand the consequences of offence, the circumstances in which he allegedly committed the offence. Most of us are aware of section 82 and 83 under the IPC, which deals with the principle of doli in capax, that a child up to the age of 7 years is not guilty of any offence, and then from 7 to 13 or 14 years he has a qualified immunity. Now there also the principle laid down is that whether the child is mature enough to understand the consequences of the offence. Now the same principle is replicated here also. So first factor is his mental and physical capacity to commit the offence. Second is to understand the consequences of his offence. And third is the circumstances in which he allegedly committed the offence. Now take for instance, the child was being abused by some person for a long time, and one day the child murders this man, his abuser. Now the child may be having mental and physical capacity to commit the offence. The child may be in a position to understand the consequences of the offence, but the circumstances in which he committed the offence may still entitle him the benefit under this provision, and he may still be tried as a child. So the board is required to make the assessment in respect of all the three factors and only thereafter pass a final order. I'll refer to a few principles on this. The board may also take the assistance of a psychologist or any other expert. If the board is satisfied on preliminary assessment that the child should be tried as a child, then it shall dispose of the matter on its own by following the procedure for trial in summon cases. This order is also appealable. In other cases, it can transmit the case to the children court. Now, what are the materials which the board must consider while making this assessment? So one would obviously be the report of the expert, that is the findings recorded by the psychologist into the mental and physical capacity of the child. Then documentary evidence, Panchanama of the scene of offence, which will reflect the circumstances, arrest Panchanama of the child in conflict with law for his physical capacity to commit the offence, medical history if given by the child before the doctor for mental capacity or his ability, contents of the statement of child in conflict with law under section 161 CRPC or under any statement recorded by the investigating agency, which will indicate the circumstances in which he allegedly committed the offence. But here the confessional part is not to be examined or relied upon. Statement of the victim for one or more other aspects, social investigation report submitted or which must be called for under section 8(3)(e) of the Act of 15 within a period of 15 days from the date of first production before the board to ascertain the circumstances in which he alleged offence was committed. Now, these are the few important points which have been highlighted in the judicial precedents, which must be taken note of. The preliminary assessment must be made by the board, consisting of at least 2 members, including the principal magistrate. Any assessment made by the principal magistrate on his own or single-handedly is null and void. Second, the preliminary assessment is required to be done by the board and not by the psychologist. So the discretion cannot be handed over with the psychologist. The report of the psychologist cannot be blindly followed and reproduced in the order, because psychologist is only an expert. He is not a judge. After receiving the report from the psychologist and before taking the decision, the board must hear the child in conflict with law. This is also a mandatory obligation on the part of the board. The preliminary assessment must be conducted within 3 months. The timeline I have already shared with you from the first production. Now, next part is, if the board, after conducting this assessment, still transmit the child to the children court, what are the duties cast upon the children court? So upon receipt of the order of preliminary assessment from the board, the children court has to independently decide whether there is a need for trial of the child as an adult or as a child. Now, probably whatever feedback I could gather from the field in both Punjab and Haryana, most of the children court were not conducting any independent preliminary assessment. They were relying upon the assessment made by the board and straightway starting with the trial of the child. Now, all those that practice needs to be changed, because the Act, along with the rules, mandate that the children court has to make an independent assessment and reach an independent decision. Second is, before deciding this assessment, the child in conflict with law is required to be heard by the children court. Third is, the children court is again required to consider all the 3 aspects or factors which are given in section 15 of the Act. Children court should consider the report of the psychologist, ground of opinion of the psychologist on which the opinion is recorded, the social investigation report, and other material on record before reaching any decision. The children court is required to record its reasons while arriving at the conclusion. whether the child is to be treated as a child or as an adult. If the Children Court decides that there is a need for trial of the child as an adult, it has to follow the provision of Rule 13(8) of the rules. If the Children Court decides that there is no need for trial of the child as an adult, then in that eventuality, the Children Court is required to conduct the proceedings or inquiry proceedings as a board and pass appropriate orders. Now here I must draw one distinction. Now where the JJ board has conducted Section 15 assessment, wrongly believing that the given offence was covered under the category of heinous offences, and then transmitted the child to the Children Court. In that eventuality, the Children Court, if decides that this offence is not a heinous offence as per the definition, and therefore Section 15 is not applicable, in that eventuality, the Children Court is required to remand the case back to the board for adjudication. But where it is a heinous offence, the board has taken a decision, transmitted the case to the Children Court. In that eventuality, when the Children Court decides that this child must be tried as a child, upsetting the order of assessment of the Children Court, in that case, the Children Court is not going to remand back the case. Rather, it is going to conduct the inquiry proceedings at its own level and pass any order as per Section 18 of the Act. Now, the Children Court is also required to state proper reasons for conclusion. Now, this case which is being reflected on the this slide, the entire matter has been adjudicated in this case. So this case may be also referred to for detailed discussion on this area. Now, next part is review of pendency of inquiry. Now, this is the obligation which is cast upon the CGM, that he shall review the pendency of cases of board once in every 3 months. The reason is that where the board has exceeded the time limit, he is required to shut down the proceedings in those cases and shall direct the board to increase the frequency of its sitting or may recommend the constitution of additional boards. Now, orders which can be passed by the board where the child is not found to be in conflict with law, it is simple that the child would be required to be released if he is not found to be in conflict with law. And additionally, if the child also fall in the category of child in need of care and protection, then it must refer the child to the Child Welfare Committee. Next is the orders which the board can pass when the child is found to be guilty of commission of the offence. In that case, it can allow the child to go home after advice, admonition, counseling, ground counseling, perform community service under supervision, payment of fine, releasing on probation of good conduct. So all these orders can be passed by the board. Now next is that where the Children Court has adjudicated and found the child in conflict with law, pass the sentence order also. Now there Section 20 obligates upon the Children Court to make a second assessment with regard to the child, that whether the child has reformed himself or not. Now this is to be done when the child attains the age of 21 years. The report which is to be called must indicate that whether the child has undergone the reformative changes, and thereafter the Children Court may adopt either of the two courses. It may either decide the release of the child on such conditions that it deems fit, or it may transmit the child to the regular jail to complete the remainder of his sentence. Now, the order which may not be passed against the child are stipulated in section 21 of the Act. So a child who is found in conflict with law, even in respect of capital punishment offences, cannot be sentenced to death or life imprisonment with the condition that there will be no possibility of his release for such offence under the provision of IPC or under any other law. So we cannot, the Children Court cannot pass an order of sentence stating that the child, the life imprisonment by the child shall be till his death. So he cannot be denuded of the beneficial provisions of this remission or commutation of sentence. So all these beneficial provisions can't be taken away from the juvenile while passing the sentence, even in respect of offences carrying capital punishment. But there are certain miscellaneous provisions also, that there shall not be any joint trial against any child with the adult. Now here one question arises that where in a regular trial the court receives an application under section 319 CRPC for summoning additional accused, and one of the additional accused summoned is a juvenile. Now in that case, once the juvenile has been summoned, then his proceedings are to be transmitted to the JJ board. That cannot be conducted by the regular court. Similarly, if before the JJ board an application under 319 CRPC has been filed and the JJ board has summoned additional accused, some of which are found to be adult, in that case also the entire proceedings qua the adult is required to be transmitted to the CGM, and from there onward it shall go to the Court of Session as per the nature of the offence, whether it is a session triable case or it is a it is triable by any magistrate. But in no case there can be a joint proceedings of the child in conflict with law with an adult person. Another important aspect is that a child who has been found in conflict with law, he shall not suffer any kind of disqualification even on his conviction. But this is not applicable to the juveniles between the bracket of 16 to 18 years of age who have been tried as an adult. Then relevant record of conviction and everything has to be destroyed. Then next aspect is the inquiry to be conducted in respect of age of the accused in order to find out whether he is a juvenile or he is not a juvenile. Now, so far as the question of age is concerned, it may arise or crop up at different stages of a trial or proceedings. Let us suppose an offence has been committed. The investigating officer or the police officer at the very first instance finds that the offender is a juvenile. So once he forms an opinion or comes to the conclusion that the offender is a juvenile, then immediately he will start following the provisions of this act. Second is that the police officer did not care to examine or it didn't come to his notice that the offender is a juvenile and is produced before the Ilaka magistrate for remand. Now at that stage also the same question may come up either by the magistrate suo motu or on the application of any party to make inquiry into the age of that accused. So suppose even that stage is missed. When the police report is furnished, at that stage, again this issue may come up. Then even if that stage is also missed, then at any stage after the framing of charge till the conclusion of trial, or even that stage is crossed, then before the appellate court, before the revisional court, before the Honorable Apex Court. So the question of age of the accused may arise before any court, in any proceedings, at any stage. Section 9 of this Act, of this 2015 Act, says it deals with the situations where the accused who is produced before it is produced by showing him as an adult, and then he is called upon to make an inquiry into the age of the accused. Now it says that when a magistrate who is not empowered to exercise the power of the board is of the opinion that the person alleged to have committed the offence is a child, he shall, without any delay, record such opinion and forward the child immediately along with the record of the proceedings to the board having jurisdiction. Second is, now the first was the opinion formed by the magistrate on his own. Second is, in case a person alleged to have committed an offence claims before the court other than the board that the person is a child or was a child on the date of commission of the offence, and the court forms an opinion that yes, he was a child on the date of commission of the offence, it shall conduct an inquiry, taking evidence so and so, and then determining the age of the accused. Third is that if the court finds that the person has committed an offence and was a child on the date of commission of such offence, it shall forward the child to the board for passing appropriate orders, and the sentence, if any, passed by the court shall deem to have no effect. Now, this deals with a situation where conviction has already been rendered, and thereafter it is found that the accused is a juvenile. So therefore, there is no need to conduct a re-inquiry into the allegations to find out whether he has committed the offence or he has not committed the offence, because that part stands concluded. And the only point is to grant him benefit, that instead of sentencing, he would be amenable to the board for passing any beneficial order under section 18 of the Act. So sentence part would go, the conviction part would remain intact, and the board shall be obligated to pass any beneficial order under section 18 of the Act. Now, next part is that what are the materials to determine the age of the accused in such cases. Now here we have section 94 of this Act. Now I'll just make a comparative chart of the precursor Act of 2000 and the present Act of 2015, that what criteria is to be adopted while conducting an inquiry into the age of the accused to find out whether he's a juvenile or was a juvenile on the date of commission of the offence. Now in the precursor Act of 2000 we had Rule 12, which indicated the parameters, and under the new Act we have section 94 subsection 2. Now if we compare the parameters, we will find that under the new Act, the first criteria to find out the age is the date of birth certificate from school, matriculation or equivalent certificate from the concerned examination board if available. So first, the board or the court is required to make inquiry into this part, that is date of birth certificate. If it is found to be genuine by examining the record, then there is no requirement to step on to number 2 or number 3. Then the court is required to declare the accused as a juvenile. In any case, if the court finds that this first parameter is either not available or is not found to be genuine, in that case, it can move on to the next one. That is the birth certificate given by a corporation or municipal authority or a panchayat. Now, if this is found to be genuine, evincing credence, then again, the court is required to declare him a juvenile, and there is no need to shift on to parameter number 3. It is only in the absence of the first 2 parameters, the court shall determine the age by conducting an ossification test. And it has to be completed within the period of 15 days from the date of such order. Now, this is the broad criteria to find out the age of the accused, to declare him either a juvenile or an adult. Now here, in some cases where the accused after committing offence had absconded or was not available immediately, and when he was apprehended, let us suppose he has crossed the age of 30, 25 or whatever it is. Now in that case, there is a method of retrospective because that is only in the opinion of the expert. So in such cases, that retrospective test report will come. That will also give some information to the courts or the board or the children court while conducting the section 15 assessment into the 3 factors stated therein. Then last part I would like to discuss is regarding the appeal, revision and revisions. Now, there is some problem with the language of the statutory provision in this regard. Like the bail order passed by the board, appeal lies to the children court, and against the order of the children court, revision lies to the Honorable High Court. But if we read section 101, it says any person aggrieved by an order made by the committee or the board under this act within 30 days may prefer an appeal to the children court. Now here it is not indicated whether it is the final order or even the interlocutory orders passed by the board, all are appealable, or only the final orders are appealable. Second is, an appeal shall lie against the order of the board after making preliminary assessment into the heinous offence under section 15. Now this is specifically provided for, that it shall lie to the children court. Third is that where the appeal shall not lie. So no appeal shall lie against the order of acquittal made by the board in respect of child alleged to have committed an offence other than heinous offence. Any order made by the committee in respect of finding that the person is not a child in need of care and protection. No second appeal shall lie from an order of the Court of Session passed in appeal under this section. Revision, however, is maintainable before the Honorable High Court against the order of the Children Court. Now there are twofold problematic areas in this. One is that we find that in the provision at certain point the word children court is employed. At other points the word Court of Session is employed. So that creates a bit confusion that whether the appeal shall be maintainable before the Court of Session or the children court. But in situations where children court has been established, then it shall be filed before the children court itself. Then probably, Chetan, we can have the question answer session instead of because I shall be putting up this PPT on the High Court website.
Okay, sir.
Sorry, the Academy website. I shall be putting up the PPT on the Academy website, so the officer can have the PPT from there and refer to the case law from that.
Sure, sir. So I think everyone has already heard that part. So like you said, sir, we will get into the question answer rounds. First of all, thank you for keeping the track of time as well, sir, and thank you for detailing the entire presentation in a swift manner. Now, Sir, the first question, I'll club the first and second question is something similar, but they're talking about different sections, so I'll read it separately. The first question is about a 15-year-old girl has been apprehension of her arrest in the FIR register under section 326 of IPC, which is against her and an adult accused. She intends to apply for a pre-arrest bail, where the Juvenile Justice Board can grant such bail, or such for such she has to approach the Court of Sessions.
Now, so far as the concept of pre-arrest or anticipatory bail is concerned, there is a cleavage of opinion among the Honorable High Courts. But so far as our own Honorable High Court is concerned, the consistent view is that the anticipatory bail application is not maintainable in case of juveniles under this act.
Okay.
Though normally the lawyers file application by writing the nomenclature of section 438 read with section 12 and so and so, but it is not to be confused with the anticipatory or pre-arrest bail. The nomenclature of the application is definitely defective. So therefore, the board, while granting the bail under section 12, is not granting any anticipatory bail. It's a bail under section 12 of the act. So in the PPT, they will find the judgments of different high courts taking different views. But by and large, most of the high courts have taken the view that pre-arrest bail is not maintainable. That is one. Second is that where, let us assume a situation that where the age of the accused is in dispute. He has not been declared juvenile by any court.
Okay.
And the prosecution is disputing his age.
Mm-hmm.
In that case, he can surely apply for the anticipatory bail either before the Court of Session or before the Honorable High Court under 438. But so far as the board is concerned, it is never granting any anticipatory bail, irrespective of the wrong nomenclature of the bail application being filed before them by the lawyers.
Okay, sir. So I think this the answer to the question, the answer to the next question will be the same, because it's saying the same thing, but it's talking about that the boy is 70-year-old and accused of an offence under 376 IPC and Section 6 of POCSO Act, whether he filed the application before the JJ board, or in the Children's Court ahead of the additional session judge, constituted wide notification dated 18th of June 2013.
Let me clarify on this aspect.
Sir.
That when the transition was made from the Act of 2000 to 2015, we will notice one important factor, that so far as Section 12 is concerned, that has not been changed. So one is that irrespective of the nature of the offence, whether heinous, serious, petty offence,
Okay.
or the age of the juvenile, that is 16 to 18 years or below 16 years,
Right, sir.
irrespective of all these factors, the bail application has to be considered by the JJ board first, as per section 12 of the act. Number one. Sometimes the question comes from the field that where the child has been declared as under section 15 by the board that he should be tried as an adult, that then whether the children court, while considering the bail application, will apply the same parameters under section 12 while granting bail, or different parameters. The answer is the same parameters are to be made applicable even when the children court is going to consider the bail application of the juvenile under section 12. So no different parameters. This section nowhere says that in case of juveniles accused of heinous offences between the age bracket of 16 to 18 years, their bail application is required to be considered separately. So no separate parameters, same parameters would be applicable in all situations.
Sir. Okay, sir. So moving to the next question. It says the prosecution agency produced report under section 173 of CRPC for offence under section 307 and 34 IPC against a child in conflict before the juvenile, before the JJ board. Two accused who are adults have been kept in column number 2 by the prosecution agency after declaring them innocent. Whether remedy is available to victim for proceeding against adult accused.
Yes, now so far as the report under 173 CRPC is concerned, now if it is filed before the regular criminal court or before the magistrate, then definitely under section 190 CRPC, the court can ignore the opinion of the investigating agency and summon those two accused who have been put in column number 2 and proceed further. Now let us visualize a situation where there are certain juveniles also and certain adult also in that eventuality. Now their segregation of proceeding must be done by the court. Juvenile, they will have to be sent back to the board, and adult accused, their trial will be conducted here before the regular court. Another important aspect, Chetan, which probably in the field is being defectively followed in this regard is that whenever an adult and child, they are together, either the board or the regular court, they direct the investigating agency to file a fresh police report in respect of the other accused juvenile or the adult. Now that is totally a wrong order. When you are summoning an accused under 319 CRPC, it is your order by which the accused has been summoned. The investigating agency has got nothing to do with the same. Okay. Only the photocopy of the entire record along with the copy of the order under 319 CRPC is to be transmitted to the concerned court. They cannot order the investigating agency to prepare a fresh challan and file before the concerned court. So all those orders are wrong. So they should also keep in mind this factor also. Another factor which I would like to also share, probably I can share now. So it was regarding the correlation of presumptions under the POCSO Act, NDPS Act, which exist in favor of the prosecution vis-a-vis section 3 of the JJ Act 2015. Now JJ Act 2015 in section 3 gives general principles to be followed in the application of the act, and one of the principles is presumption of innocence in respect of the child up to the age of 18 years. Now the reconciliation is that this is a procedural act, JJ Act, by and large. So far as the POCSO and NDPS Act is concerned, those are substantive penal acts. Okay. So once you are adjudicating the penal liability or adjudicating the liability of the child while conducting proceedings either before the JJ board or the children court, then those presumption of POCSO Act as well as NDPS Act would be applicable only for adjudicating his penal liability. So once you find that he is guilty of the commission of this offense, then the beneficial part of JJ Act would automatically follow. That is something different. But those presumptions would definitely come handy in adjudicating the penal liability of the juvenile.
So let's move to the next question. The question is about in the session trial under section 302 and section 34 of IPC, statement of victim is recorded. Victim witness went hostile and he was not supporting the case of the prosecution. In the same FIR, one accused is child in conflict. Now, in the inquiry before the JJ board, no witness has been recorded. What will be the effect of evidence recorded in trial of adult on the fate of bail application of child in conflict where the statement of any witness has not yet recorded?
Now, this is a common problem which our officer face in the field. Now, first of all, let me say straightforward that both the proceedings are distinct. Those cannot be confused. One. Two, a victim, let us say, before the board, she has stood by her statement, and before the regular court against the adult accused, she has turned hostile. Now, let me tell you the evidentiary value of the previous statement given by a person shall be governed by the rules of Indian Evidence Act, Section 157 and Section 1, contradictory part, 145 of the Indian Evidence Act. So therefore, if there's a previous contradictory statement, that has to be put to the witness when the witness appears in the witness box, and the effect of contradiction shall be considered by the court at the relevant point of time. Now, so far as the bail application is concerned, even if she has turned hostile against the adult accused, or she has stood before the board, but has turned hostile against the juvenile before the board, but has stood by her statement before the court. So in all the situation, this factor can be taken into consideration for considering the bail application. That is one. Two, now while referring to Section 12, I must also share another input along with all of you, that while considering the bail application of the juvenile, if the board finds or the principal magistrate finds that the allegations are such or the supporting evidence is such that even the adult accused would be granted bail, then the board is not required to apply the three situations of Section 12. Straightway bail is to be granted, because the idea of JJ Act is not to put the juvenile to a disadvantage by carving out Section 12. There are three exceptional situations in the bail can be refused. But suppose the main accused has been granted bail, who is an adult, then there is no point in denying the bail to the juvenile. So therefore, all these parameters are required to be taken into consideration. So if the allegations are unsupported, or if the main accused who are adults are already on bail, then there is no point to keep the juvenile under apprehension or under custody.
So, sir, you already have spoken about the juvenile. If there can be anticipatory bail on behalf of juvenile offender. The question is on the same line. I think you have already answered, so you can probably explain it, and it will be your call, sir. The question is whether anticipatory bail application on behalf of juvenile offender is maintainable.
Yes, sir. I would just like to make 2 points. One, there is a cleavage of opinion, difference of opinion among the Honorable High Courts on this point. One. Two, so far as Honorable Punjab and Haryana High Court is concerned, the consistent view is that anticipatory bail application of a juvenile is not maintainable. They can refer to the case law in my PPT itself. The case law of all the high courts have been discussed in the PPT itself.
So, moving to the next question, sir. Can extension of period be ordered under Section 14 or by CJM when such a request is made after almost 2 years?
No. Ordinarily the request must be filed before the time period has expired. Now here I'll bifurcate my answer into 2 aspects. So far as petty offense is concerned, the proceeding shall automatically terminate on the expiry of the time period. Therefore, question of applying for extension of time after 2 years does not arise. The proceedings are already gone. But in other situations where a gap of 2 years is there, they can make an application by giving the reasons to the CGM. And though there is no case law as such on the point as of now, but definitely the CGM can take the call and decide whether retrospective extension of time can be given by him in those situations.
So now there are two questions pertaining to section 15, and I'll take one after another. First one is whether inquiry under section 15 is mandatory before deciding the bail application. So we can have an answer on this, and then I move to the next.
Now, so far as preliminary assessment is concerned, that is entirely a different concept. It is not mandatory that bail application has to be kept open till adjudication of this section 15 assessment. So therefore, bail application is to be considered on a totally different parameters. 15 assessment is for a different purpose. So therefore, there is no need to keep it pending. Bail application can be adjudicated because in the bail application, the parameters are totally different. We have already seen it. And ultimately in section 12, by and large, the whole idea is to protect the interest of the juvenile who has come in conflict with law.
So now the second aspect is, I think it's about the interpretation of what is written in section 15, sir. It says for purpose of section 15, is it necessary to interpret circumstances in which, it's quoted phrase from there, circumstances in which a child committed offense as circumstances because of which a child committed an offense. I believe the terminology used in the section that circumstances in which offense is committed has a restricted meaning so as to limit itself to the aspect as how the offense was committed, that is, like a professional or like a child.
Now, so far as the circumstances in which the offense was committed definitely relates to the time span within which the transaction of offense took place. It can definitely take into picture certain connected previous incidents also, facts also. So the circumstances and causes of commission of the offense are entirely different. Circumstances may sometime overlap with the causes also if they are intimately connected. But so far as the phrase is concerned, since I already referred to one judgment of the court, honorable court, where they have drawn the list of material which is to be considered by the board as well as by the children court while making the assessment under section 15. So circumstances here in section 15 definitely refer to the transaction in which the offense took place.
So this has been done. Let's move to the next question, sir.
I can give one simple example also. Let us say that a young girl was about to be ravished by the juvenile. An attempt was being made, and during that attempt, the young girl, well, let us kill that the accused. Sorry, accused, not the person who made the attempt of ravishing. So in that case, definitely this circumstance, which may be one of the self-defense which he may have. So these are the circumstances which are being talked of in section 15 of the Act.
So now, sir, moving to the next question. It's about, it says that a boy aged 17 years and 11 months was apprehended while in possession of 5 kg of opium, or for that matter, for any heinous crime. Whether the JJ board shall dispose of itself inquiry without the preliminary inquiry under section 15 of JJ Act, or it is necessary to conduct this inquiry prior to final adjudication.
Now, I've already referred to the list of heinous offences. So under the NDPS Act, where the minimum punishment is 10 years, like in commercial category of contraband, The minimum sentence is 10 years. So therefore, these offences will definitely fall in the category of heinous offences. And since the juvenile age is between 16 to 18 years, then definitely the assessment is required to be conducted. So accordingly, it will be disposed of.
So now, sir, the question is about a juvenile who was given a community service as a punishment, but even after giving 2 chances, the person has not done any community services, and the judgment is silent about any punishment in case of if the person doesn't do anything. So should the board again pass an order on this quantum of the sentence?
So first is that it is not the sentence, that is one. All these are beneficial orders under section 18 which the board can pass in respect of a juvenile. Now in case of violation of the order of the board, it can modify the same. It can, suppose he has not done the community service, he's not, then it can modify the same subsequently also.
So okay, where is the question? Okay, and then move to the next question, sir. Something similar that you already answered, sir, but I think probably in a different manner, because so I'll just read it out. Whether anticipatory bail can be granted to juvenile. Earlier the question was a bit different, so I just wanted to raise this.
I've already answered that. There's a difference of opinion. Anticipatory bail is not maintainable under this act, so far as our High Court, Honorable High Court is concerned.
And so this is the same question. So I just wanted to check with you, sir. So now, sir, when juvenile himself appeared before the principal magistrate and moved application for surrender and bail, what would be the next step for the principal magistrate?
The next step is that the surrender application can be allowed. 1. 2. The board shall call for the record of the case. May keep the child in any institution till that time. 2. The board may take a bond from him and ask him to appear on the next date. That is the second option which the board can adopt. After calling for the record, the board can examine the same, that whether he is required to be bailed out or whether he is required to be apprehended and kept in some observation home, in children home, whatever it is. So therefore, the board can definitely take the call accordingly.
So, now, sir, is it mandatory to seek an opinion of a psychologist or any other expert before conducting a preliminary assessment?
It is advisable if we go through the language of the provision, section 15. It only says that the board may take the assistance of experienced psychologist or so and so. So it is optional, but considering the 3 factors which are stipulated in section 15, so the board would not be having the expertise to adjudicate upon that without the help of the report of the psychologist.
Yeah.
So, but it is not mandatory as per law as such.
But it is recommended as per law.
Yes.
Okay, sir. Now, sir, talking about where the question arises that what is the actual age of that person? Will it be, is he a juvenile or an adult? Can a school leaving certificate having date of birth of juvenile be considered for determination of his age under section 94 subpart 94 subpart 2I of the Act?
The nature of certificates which are required to be examined, I've already discussed this part. So the school leaving certificates find mention probably in this date of birth from school or matriculation. So date of birth from school can be taken care of, but they have to examine the authenticity of the certificate, on what basis it was recorded, whether it is genuine, it is or it is a false entry just prepared to wriggle out of the criminal liability. So entire inquiry is to be conducted. If the certificate is found to be genuine, and authentic, then definitely the board will have to rely upon the same.
So, also whether against the bail order passed by a juvenile court, where would the appeal would lie?
I've already stated against the order of the board, the appeal lies to the children court, and against the order of the children court, the revision lies to the Honorable High Court.
Honorable High Court against the children court.
So first step is from board to the children court, and second step is from children court to the Honorable High Court.
So, the parameters of bail of a juvenile to be tried by trial court are that of CRPC. So I think this is a statement. I'll leave this part.
This I've already given in the PPT itself that what procedure is to be adopted for conducting the inquiries in different situations. This has already been discussed.
So
I'll also can show this slide. I can play this slide also, which probably would give them the indication that what is required to be followed. We can take the next question in the meantime.
So next question is when accused,
probably yes, Chetan, this the concerned officer may see the PPT also.
So it is visible.
Yes, inquiry summary proceedings as per CRPC in case of petty offences, serious offences, summon cases procedure, heinous offences, below 16 years, summon cases procedure, above 16 years, 16 to 18 years, then again first assessment, and then accordingly it will be decided what procedure is to be followed.
So I'll take the next question, sir. When accused produced before trial court for police remand contends himself to be a minor, whereas police contends him to be an adult, I think which is very common, where the magistrate can give police remand when nothing is on record yet?
Yes, now in that eventuality, the magistrate is required to examine the contention of the accused. Now, sometime it may happen that from appearance itself, the court entertain the doubt that this accused appears to be a juvenile. Then in that situation, it needs to conduct inquiry and may refuse the police remand.
Sure.
And then go into that. But suppose if it finds that there is no basis to support the contention that he's a juvenile, then definitely remand can be given. And if he is able to produce something, then obviously inquiry is to be conducted in that.
So,
but the safer side is that if he makes a written application, then it is mandatory to conduct the inquiry into that. It obviously will be supported by some kind of material also.
okay.
But where he simply verbally says that he's a juvenile, but there is nothing on the record. Then the call is to be taken by the magistrate. If from the appearance also it appears that he's a juvenile,
Yes.
then it may conduct the inquiry.
Yes. Sure, sir. Go to the next question, sir. Now it's talking about when a juvenile applies for a job. Should a juvenile mention the factum of pendency of inquiry or conviction by the board while applying for any job?
Now, so far as the Act is concerned, it incorporates the principle of fresh start, which means anything which he has done during his juvenility will not come in his way anywhere. Now he is not required to mention. He is not required to mention as per law, even if he is convicted by the board. Even if he is convicted by the board, he is not required to mention that fact in police verification or in the filling of the application form of any for any government job. There are 2-3 decided cases on the point also, which they will find in this PPT, that where a juvenile was where a man was selected for the in the police service, and he had committed some offence during his juvenility, and later on a complaint was made. So the So the Honorable Supreme Court said that this will not come in his way to seek the job. So therefore, even the Act says that the record is required to be destroyed. Even the record cannot be maintained. In the police verification, the police cannot mention this fact that he was involved in some offence during his juvenility and he was convicted by the board. So, except in the cases of juvenile between the age bracket of 16 to 18 years, who have been tried as an adult, in the remaining categories, this fact is not to be mentioned. This fact cannot be even reported. This fact cannot be taken into consideration by any authority.
So now this thing is clear, sir. Moving to the next one. What is the effect? Now this is a question between JJ Board versus trial in a regular court. What is the effect of acquittal, sir?
Acquittal on what?
So it says what will the effect of acquittal by JJ Board vis-a-vis the trial in regular court?
Question is not as clear, but what I can make out from the question is that there are multiple accused and some of the accused are juvenile and some are adult. So there are two separate trials going on, and before the JJ Board in the inquiry, the board exonerated the juvenile that he is not found to have committed the offence. So what is the effect of this on the other trial? As such, there is no effect. I've already stated that these are two separate proceedings and should not be mixed up. One. Now, if any witness has given any statement, previous statement, now that can be used as per the Indian Evidence Act, and beyond that, there is no effect.
Okay, sir. Now, sir, a few minutes back, I asked you a question of when a juvenile says before the magistrate, sir, that I am a juvenile, I'm not an adult, and remand, then it lies on the, like you said, it lies on the magistrate, sir, to then put up an inquiry to figure it out. Now, the question is something similar, but now it's talking about heinous crime. It says that if a juvenile can be remanded to police custody to facilitate the investigation in a case of heinous crimes on application of prosecution.
In no case, if the accused is already juvenile,
so
then first is that he will be produced before the board, not before the regular magistrate or the court.
Okay.
Two, we are only talking of a situation where the prosecution is holding out that the accused is a major, is not a juvenile, whereas the accused is contending that he's a juvenile.
Yes.
So there is a contest. Where there is no contest, then the question of a regular magistracy or the regular criminal courts would not arise at all, because entire proceedings from the time of apprehension till the end are to be conducted before the board. So in the second situation, where there is a dispute between the two parties, I have already said that the call lies with the worthy magistrate, that whether he wants, whether he would grant the remand at that point of time and postpone the inquiry into the age factor, or he would like to conduct the inquiry at that very moment, postponing the remand of the accused. Now, reason is, now let us say he files a application supported by a very, we can say, credential documentary evidence. Now, in that situation, it may not be, I would say, wise to give the police remand of the accused. So it would be better if we postpone the same and conduct the inquiry into the said factor. Now, in certain situation, the magistrate can also, suppose he entertains the doubt, the magistrate can also direct the investigating officer to probe the record or to find out the record regarding the age of the accused. So, because in that situation, the investigating agency may itself on its own come to a conclusion that yes, he is a juvenile, then they can produce him before the board on its own.
Okay, sir. Now, sir, it says that can the statement of complainant recorded before JJ Board be used to contradict him in the evidence before the trial court?
Yes, I have already said that they need to refer it to the provisions of the Indian Evidence Act. They can refer to the language of Section 145 of the Evidence Act, that any previous statement before any authority who is competent to record the evidence, that statement can be used for contradiction. So therefore, JJ Board is one authority which is entitled to record the statement of the persons. So the previous statement definitely can be used for the purpose of contradiction. All I say is that regarding all these matters, they need to consult the Indian Evidence Act and accordingly decide the same.
So, the next question. A lot of questions right now. I'm just figuring it out, which have been already been discussed. So I'm just gonna. So now, in the case of juvenile to be treated as adult, what would be the fate of trial by CC without adhering to Section 8, Subpart 2, 15 and 19 of the Act, read with Rule 13 of the Rules 2016 of 2016?
Can you repeat the section of Chetan? 8?
So the section is 8 Subpart 2.
Yes.
And Section 15 and 19 of the Act, read with Rule 13 of the Rules 2016.
Where the proper procedure has not been followed while conducting the trial, the same can definitely be set aside by the higher court. There are reported cases where the adjudication made by the children court in contravention of the provisions of the Act, those have been set aside. The appellate court or the divisional court can remand the case back or can adjudicate accordingly depending upon the fact situation.
Okay, sir. Now, next question. Okay. So next question is by Mr. Rajesh Sharma, ADJ Chandigarh Court. Whether an accused whose life imprisonment has already been upheld by the Honorable Supreme Court can now raise a plea of juvenility before the magistrate, and such magistrate, by declaring him juvenile, can let him off with lesser punishment.
So far as the inquiry into the age by the regular magistracy or court is concerned, the act makes a bifurcation. Now, there are twofold situations which are visualized under the Act. One is before the board, or the we can say set of authorities which are there under the Act relating to juveniles. Second is in any proceedings which is pending before any court. Now, in this situation where the regular proceedings have been terminated up to the Honorable Apex Court, then he can't make a fresh start by filing an application before the magistrate. Instead, he should apply or he should move an application before the Honorable Apex Court, and therefrom he can seek the direction of getting this inquiry conducted into his age factor. The Honorable Apex Court may then direct the board or any other authority to conduct the inquiry in the age, but he cannot simply come up before the magistrate after everything is over and make a fresh start before the magistrate by filing an application and saying that I was juvenile 70 years back. Now, so far as the other courts are concerned, Section 9 clearly says that whenever the proceedings are pending before these courts, then only these can be raised.
Okay. So I think that was a good question actually. I'm sure you would know it better, sir. Now, sir, moving to the next question, sir. If a CCL has committed an offence under POCSO Act and upon victims who belong to SC community, then he will be tried by special court under SC Act or POCSO court or children court.
Now, irrespective of the offence, under any law of the land, the trial of the juvenile, the inquiry into his being conflict in law has to be conducted as per the JJ Act. So therefore, board and the children court. irrespective of the nature of the offence.
So now, sir, talking about the probation, whether probation of juvenile under Section 18 of the Act is governed by the Probation of Offenders Act 1958.
No, that is not governed by that act. This act itself postulates in the rules as well as in the provision, the orders which are to be passed. So the probation, what bond is to be taken, for how long the bond can be taken. So everything is there in the act itself.
So, if a preliminary inquiry necessary for heinous offence by board, can bail application by juvenile application or applicant can be kept waiting till the inquiry is concluded?
We have already answered this question that there is no need to keep this bail application pending. Bail parameters are entirely different, and this 15 assessment which is being done by the board is for a different purpose. So therefore, these are not to be confused.
So now, a question by Neeraj Goel, sir, who's very active on these webinars. I think every webinar I see Goel sir's name over here. Question is whether an accused is produced in the court and is sent to jail, and then he moves the application before JMIC for declaring him child in conflict with law. Then during inquiry on that application, whether the applicant is to be kept in regular jail or to be shifted to any other place.
So till he is declared a juvenile, till then the regular CRPC would be applicable. Once he is declared juvenile, only thereafter this act would be applicable and to be done everything under this act. So because at that stage it's only an inquiry is still pending. So he may be declared, he may not be declared. So there is no point in shifting him to the under the JJ Act. So he'll be kept where he is, and inquiries to be conducted expeditiously, and thereafter call is to be taken by the magistrate.
So another question by Neeraj Goel, sir, is if child in conflict with law is apprehended and is to be produced in the court on the holiday, and on that day learned principal magistrate of JJ board is not available, then before whom the said child to be produced, that is whether before duty magistrate or other members of JJ board or either of them?
Now first thing, when in the opening slide and the opening statement, when I started with my presentation, I said that this is a self-contained act. It's a special act, and so far as juveniles are concerned, everything from the first point of time, that is apprehension, till the end, everything is to be regulated by this act. Now, in such there is specific provision in the rules itself that the principal magistrate is required to prepare a list of the board members or duty members or duty magistrate in respect of the board, and furnish the list to the CGM of the entire month. So therefore, where the principal magistrate himself is on leave or is not available, the juvenile is to be produced before any other member of the board, and nothing is to be done by the regular magistracy or duty magistrate or anybody else. Everything has to be done by the board. So there can be any member. So this list they will find before the CGM of every month, that who is the duty member during the holidays and everything.
So, sir, this question I'm not really sure if you have covered it because it's a different language altogether. So you can, I would need your help on this, sir. The question is, what is the effect of doubling of evidence in JJ board on one side and regular court on the other side on the same case?
So far as doubling of evidence is concerned, it's not doubling because proceedings are entirely different. Their end result is entirely different. The parameters are entirely different. Reason is, here we have already stated in section 3, it is not an adversarial inquiry which is to be conducted by the board or the children court. It has to be conducted in a child-friendly atmosphere with the participation of the child in all the inquiry proceedings. So therefore, the parameters are different, the end results and the we can say the conclusions are totally different. So therefore, it is not doubling of evidence as such. Because before the regular court, the adult would be tried. There the parameters are different. The rules of evidence would be strictly followed. CRPC procedure would be strictly followed. But here there is a lot of leverage with the board and the children court, and they are mandated to conduct the inquiry or the trial in a child-friendly atmosphere with the participation of the juveniles.
So we're almost on the end of the question answer round. I think it's the second last question. Whether bail application of a juvenile above the age of 16 years alleged to have committed heinous offence is to be decided by JJ board pending preliminary assessment under section 15 of the Act?
Answer is yes. I've said already. I don't know why our board members or our judicial officers are so hostile. They need to imbibe the spirit of the Act first of all. That's why I said the more which is required is the attitudinal change. The sensitization is much more required while adjudicating the trial of the juvenile or dealing with the juvenile under this Act. They need to shun off the adversarial approach. I don't know why they are so hostile to the grant of bail to the juveniles, and again they are confusing it with the nature of the offence. We have already discussed this in detail. They can dismiss the bail application if they find the case of the juvenile being covered in any of the 3 grounds which are given in section 12. But there is no point in keeping pending. Look, all I want to say is that they should consult the statutory provision before they make any comment. So if there is nothing written in section 12 that the bail application of the juvenile whose assessment under section 15 is to be made by the board is to be kept pending, then they should not raise or such kind of doubts in their mind regarding the bail application. The bail application has to be adjudicated independently. Whatever they decide, that is something different. But they should not keep this thing in mind that this has to be kept pending because he's accused of committing heinous offence, so and so, so and so. So all these are totally immaterial consideration which they should sweep away from their mind while taking the bail application under section 12 of the Act.
So certainly, sir. So this brings me to the last question of the session. The question is, what is the effect of complainant turning hostile on the proceedings before the JJ board, and can bail to juvenile be granted in the heinous crimes on those bases where personal security of juvenile is at risk?
Now, first of all, when the victim has turned hostile and there is nothing on record, there is no material to implicate him, then definitely he should be granted the bail. That is one. The second is that the board coming to the conclusion that he may come in contact with certain or any of the 3 grounds, first 2 grounds are made out, not the third one. The first 2 grounds are made out. Then it may pass any order in that context which goes in the benefit of the juvenile. So, but there must be a cogent material. There must be a cogent material to record reasons and deny the bail application. I've already stated that in those situations where the adult accused would be entitled to bail, then there is no need to apply section 12 at all. Then they must grant the bail application to the juvenile also, irrespective whatever the offence is. Because if the adult accused is entitled to bail, then the juvenile can't be put to disadvantage in that situation. Second, but if they find that yes, there's an exceptional situation that where if we release him on bail, he may be exposed to some physical danger, this and that, then definitely they can pass some beneficial order for the juvenile under the Act.
So, sir, this brings us to the end of the question and answer round. And I think without knowingly, it's been almost 2 hours that you've been sharing your knowledge and you've been answering questions. I think a lot of questions have been answered today, and I'm sure there will be quite a few more questions members would have. Like we always say that Academy is always accessible. You know, we can reach out to Academy through phone, telephones, or emails. So, like sir, you have already mentioned that this PPT would be available on the website of the Academy. So all the citation will be available, and if anyone wants to refer to the content that you've shared today, will also be available. So
Yes.
thank you so much, sir, for today's session, sir. Anything that you would like to say, sir, before we conclude?
I thank you everybody for listening patiently and being with me for this long 2 hours, sparing their valuable time, and their words of appreciation, their question and answers. They all act as a motivating factor for me to perform better in the coming webinars. And I have also learned a lot today with the questioning which our judicial officers, my colleagues, have put to me, and I am thankful to them, to all of them, for sharing this platform with the Academy. And all of us hope, including the Academy, that this platform would be an enriching experience for all of us on both the sides, that is the Academy people as well as our officers in the field. And thank you so much, everybody, for being with me.
Thank you, sir. I think on behalf of the Academy and on behalf of, I think, all the members who joined in today, I think I would like to put this on record, sir. Doing the, answering all the questions, it's like 10 people or 20 people are asking questions and one person is answering the question. I think in itself, it's a big task, sir. And I think you have just done it so smoothly that it looks like that it's such an easy task to do. But I think everyone also would agree with me that it is not. It is not it's not easy to sit over there and answer all the questions. I think that's where your expertise, that's where your knowledge comes in handy, sir. So, sir, on behalf of Chennai Judicial Academy, on behalf of everyone, on behalf of SCC Online,
I would like to say one thing, that I thank you also, but all we people are doing here is we are trying to do hard work as per our capacity. We are not perfect as such, so we may not be even we may not be even coming up to the expectation of some of our colleagues also, but we always endeavor and try to make the best possible effort within our capacity and give out our best. So I thank once again everybody, and Chetan also.
Sir. Thank you, sir. Then we will just end this session now, sir. Right, and we'll meet tomorrow, same time, for the next session. This, sir, we'll end this session. Everyone, thank you.